She was just a struggling woman from Brooklyn, raising her sick brother alone, until a mysterious billionaire saved her from a cruel trap and offered her a deal that changed everything. But love, betrayal, and a hidden child would tear them apart until fate brought them back 5 years later. Who is Ella Monroe? And why did the most powerful man in New York risk it all to win her back? This story will break your heart, then heal it. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more breathtaking love stories like this one. Rain poured from the midnight sky, a relentless rhythm that echoed the exhaustion etched into Ella Monroe's bones. She stood in the cramped kitchen of her deteriorating apartment in Brooklyn, peeling off her soaked work uniform with trembling fingers. The flickering light bulb above cast jittery shadows across cracked walls and water-stained cabinets, a perfect reflection of the life she could no longer afford to hold together. At just 25, Ella felt decades older, worn down by 14-hour shifts at the corner store and the crushing weight of hospital bills for her 15-year-old brother, Noah. His heart condition had worsened in the last year, and every beep of his hospital monitor haunted her like a ticking clock counting down what little time they had left. The walls creaked as she moved, and she didn't notice the man sitting quietly in the corner of the shared apartment unit down the hall. Damian Hartley, 30 and cloaked in anonymity, watched through dark glasses. A black beanie shaded half his face, the rest masked by a rugged beard and a silence so profound it had unnerved every tenant, except Ella. To her, he was just the blind drifter who'd rented the tiny room from the landlord upstairs. But in reality, Damian was the CEO of Hartley Group, a billion-dollar real estate empire under siege by an internal leak. He'd taken the room under a false name to stay close to one of the company's compromised development sites. He hadn't expected to find someone like her, strong, silent, heartbreakingly beautiful in her exhaustion. That night, Ella returned from her shift to find her father, Daniel Monroe, waiting in her hallway with the tense stiffness of a storm about to break. Behind him stood his second wife, Teresa, a woman whose smiles were as brittle as her tone, and Savannah, Ella's stepsister, perfectly made up and perfectly cruel. They hadn't come to check on Noah. They'd come to make her choose. "Victor Blackwood is offering $5 million, Daniel said flatly, his arms crossed as if already prepared for a fight. "All you have to do is marry him." Ella froze mid-step, the wet fabric of her shirt clinging to her skin. Victor was nearly 50, a real estate investor with a leer that made her stomach crawl. She'd met him once at a corporate fundraiser arranged by her father, a man who'd spent more time negotiating deals than showing up at Noah's hospital. "I'm not doing it," she said softly but firmly. "I can't." Teresa's expression hardened, and Savannah let out a mocking snort, her phone still in hand. "You think you're too good for him? While your brother lies in a hospital bed and your father's company crumbles? Grow up, Ella." Her heart pounded. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "There isn't," Daniel snapped, stepping closer, his voice low and brutal. "You either save this family or you bury your brother. You choose." The words gutted her. Ella turned and fled into the night, the cold rain slapping her cheeks as if punishing her for even hesitating. She didn't notice that Damian had followed her out, staying several steps behind, concern etched deep beneath his disguise. She disappeared into a nearby alley, her breath ragged, her body trembling. For a moment, she collapsed against the brick wall and let the sobs come. The next evening, Savannah texted with a surprising invitation. "Let's talk. Just us. I'll buy you a drink." Exhausted and raw, Ella dared to hope. Maybe her stepsister had found a shred of humanity. Maybe there was still a chance to fix something. She showed up at the dimly lit bar in her worn jacket, heart pounding, eyes darting toward every face. Savannah greeted her with a bright smile and 2 cocktails already waiting. They toasted, they talked. And while Ella's guard slowly lowered, Savannah slipped a tiny vial from her purse and emptied it into Ella's drink with a practiced flick of her wrist. Victor Blackwood watched from a nearby booth, his smile growing wider as Ella's head began to droop. "She's all yours now," Savannah whispered as she stepped away from the table. But someone else had been watching too. Damian Hartley, seated near the exit in a shadowed booth, saw it all. The switch, the smirk, the predator closing in. and something inside him snapped. Damien moved with the precision of someone who had spent his life watching from the sidelines, calculating risk. But this wasn't business. This was something else, something personal. He crossed the bar with a quiet fury in every step, pushing past drunken patrons and cheap neon lights, eyes locked on the booth where Victor Blackwood now leaned too close to Ella. Her head lolled to the side, her hand limp around the rim of her glass. Damien's jaw clenched. Victor's fingers were sliding along her arm when Damien's voice cut through the music like a blade. "She's with me." Victor froze mid-motion, startled by the calm but razor-sharp tone. He looked up, irritation darkening his expression until he recognized Damien's imposing frame. "Back off," Victor growled. "She's not. I said," Damien repeated, lower this time, stepping closer. "She's with me." For a moment the entire booth stilled. Then, with a grunt and a flash of annoyance, Victor stood and backed off, muttering something crude under his breath. Damien ignored him, his full attention on Ella. She stirred as he reached her, her eyes fluttering open just enough to see him. "Damien?" she whispered, confusion clouding her words. "I've got you," he murmured, wrapping his arm around her waist and lifting her to her feet. She slumped against him, barely able to stand. He carried her outside into the rain, where the night air seemed to shake off the haze from her mind. She blinked up at him, dazed, her fingers gripping the front of his coat. Why are you helping me?" Damien looked down at her, his heart beating harder than he wanted to admit. "Because you don't deserve any of this," he said simply. They sat on a quiet bench under the awning of a closed bookstore, raindrops drumming against the metal frame above. Ella leaned into him, head resting on his shoulder, her voice hoarse. She told him everything. About Noah, about her father, about the ultimatum. Her words came in gasps, thick with disbelief and shame, but she didn't cry. She just looked exhausted, like she'd been holding up the weight of the world for too long. Damien listened, his fists clenched, rage boiling beneath his calm. He'd built his empire by staying detached, by never letting emotions dictate decisions. But this woman, this beautiful, stubborn, resilient woman, was shattering all his rules. When she finished, he took her hand. "Marry me," he said. Ella blinked, startled. "Marry me," he repeated, eyes locked on hers. "I'll pay for Noah's treatment. I'll protect you from your family, from Victor, from all of it. You won't have to run anymore." "You don't even know me," she whispered, her voice raw. Damien smiled, the first real one he'd allowed himself in months. "I know enough. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. You'd sell your soul to save your brother. Let me help you. Say yes, and we'll figure the rest out together." Ella stared at him. The rain had stopped, but her heart hadn't. Her instinct screamed this was madness, but so was everything else. And for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Slowly, almost painfully, she nodded. Yes. By the time dawn broke, Ella found herself awake in a world that didn't feel real. She lay on a bed so soft it cradled her like a cloud, the silk sheets cool against her skin. She sat up slowly, sunlight pouring through tall windows, illuminating a sleek Manhattan penthouse unlike anything she'd ever imagined. Damien stood by the glass wall, now without the glasses or the beard, his true identity glowing in the morning light. Sharp hazel eyes, strong jawline, every inch the powerful man she'd never dreamed she'd meet. He turned and walked toward her with measured steps, his expression unreadable but his voice warm. "Good morning." Ella swallowed hard, the events of the night rushing back. The bar, the drug, his arms, the proposal. She looked at him, unsure if this was still part of the dream. "I meant what I said," Damien said softly. "You're safe here." He opened a drawer beside the bed and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled like morning dew. "This is yours, if you'll have it." Ella stared, breathless. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Damien stepped closer and slid the ring onto her trembling finger. "Because I see you, not just the girl trying to survive, but the woman beneath. And I want to give you something better." The days that followed unfolded like something out of a dream, but Ella couldn't quite shake the edge of fear that clung to her chest. Damien had transformed her world in a matter of hours, driving her to an estate in the Hamptons, where waves whispered against the shore, placing keys to a cherry-red Porsche in her hand, and transferring $10 million into a private account under her name. "This is your life now," he said with a quiet certainty that made her chest ache. But with each luxurious gift, Ella felt the weight of it all deepen. She hadn't earned this. Not really. She was still the girl from Brooklyn, with a sick brother and a past that clawed at her heels. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from Noah's doctor. The latest one knocked the breath from her lungs. His heart was weakening, and experimental surgery was his best chance. $500,000. Ella felt her knees weaken. She couldn't wait. That night, she found Damien in his home office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling shelves of blueprints and contracts. He looked up the moment she entered, sensing the storm on her face. "I hate asking you for this," she began, voice brittle, "but my brother, his surgery, it's urgent. My father's company, if you invested in it even as a front, they could use that money for Noah." Damien's face didn't soften. If anything, it hardened, not out of reluctance but something deeper, a guarded fury. He stepped around the desk and took her hands. "You never have to beg me, Ella. I'll do it. For you. For him." The next morning, Damien wired the funds to Monroe Construction under the guise of a silent partner. Ella didn't know it would raise flags that would reach the ears of Damien's father, Henry Hartley, faster than wildfire. That very evening, Henry summoned him back to the family estate. When Damien arrived, the old man stood by the fireplace like a king ready to pass judgment. His voice was like a blade. $5 million to a failing company owned by that girl's family? She's playing you. She's not like that, Damien said, jaw tight. Henry slammed his glass onto the mantel, the echo thunderous. You're risking our legacy for someone who will ruin you. Open your eyes. Behind him, Nolan Hartley leaned against the doorway, a lazy grin curling his lips. She's got you wrapped around her finger, brother, he said with venom disguised as humor. How long before she bleeds you dry? Damien's eyes narrowed, the weight of their words clawing at him. You don't know her, you never even tried. But Nolan wasn't done. He'd been waiting for this moment. He slid a manila envelope across the polished table. You should see this. Damien opened it slowly. Inside was a printed DNA test, clinic logo at the top, and a single damning line, paternity not established. The child was not his. Damien's world tilted on its axis. He barely noticed his father's scoff or Nolan's smug silence. The paper blurred in his hands. It couldn't be true. Ella wouldn't lie about something like this. End it, Henry barked. Or you're no grandson of mine. By the time Damien returned to the penthouse, the sun had dipped behind the buildings. Ella was in the kitchen, preparing tea, humming faintly. She turned at his silence. One look at his face, and her heart seized. What's wrong? She asked. He didn't answer at first. He set the test on the table like it weighed 100 pounds. Ella picked it up. As she read, her blood ran cold. This isn't true, she whispered. Damien, I swear to you, this is your child. I've never. Just tell me this is a mistake, he said, his voice rough, almost begging. Her voice broke. It is. But his silence hurt more than his doubt. I need time, he finally said, stepping back. Ella stood frozen. Then something in her cracked. If you don't trust me, Damien, then there's nothing left to fight for. She turned and walked away, her feet numb, heart shattered. Damien didn't stop her. That night, Ella fled New York. With Noah by her side and a baby on the way, she vanished into the quiet outskirts of a New Jersey town, her world collapsing and yet, somehow, still breathing. 5 years passed like a tide, slow at first, then all at once. Ella Monroe, once a worn-out cashier from Brooklyn, had become a name whispered in boardrooms and startup circles. Her sharp intuition and quiet grit had built a small empire from the ashes of her former life. It started with that mysterious fund, wired monthly without name or message, always enough to cover the next step. She didn't know Damien had arranged it through his assistant, watching from afar, never daring to reach out, but never letting her fall. She only knew that every time she thought she'd lose everything, something arrived to push her forward. She raised her son Micah in a modest house in New Jersey, far from the shadows of the Hartleys and Monroes. He had Damien's hazel eyes and calm demeanor, traits Ella couldn't hide from, even when she tried. Noah, now 20 and studying environmental science at college, had transformed into a young man full of life, his health restored after the surgery that had once seemed impossible. Ella had juggled night classes, odd jobs, and a fierce determination to make something better for all of them. She used that anonymous fund to invest in small businesses, to grow her acumen. And with time, she did the unthinkable. She bought out the crumbling remains of Monroe Construction, the company her father had nearly destroyed through embezzlement and recklessness. Piece by piece, Ella had acquired silent shares until one morning she walked into the Monroe boardroom in a tailored navy blazer, hair slicked into a clean bun, and dropped the truth like a thunderclap. "You're looking at the majority shareholder now," she said, sliding a thick folder of legal documents across the table. Daniel Monroe, red-faced and stammering, sneered across the polished mahogany. "This is still my company." "Not anymore," she replied, her voice calm, slicing through the tension like ice. Teresa and Savannah burst in moments later, Savannah's heels clicking like gunfire on the floor. "You can't do this," she hissed. "We'll fight you." Ella opened a second folder. Evidence of tax fraud, embezzlement, threats, all compiled with the help of someone who knows this world better than any of you. Police officers entered seconds later. Daniel stood up in protest, only to be met with handcuffs and Miranda rights. Teresa collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Savannah tried to flee but was blocked by security. Back in Manhattan, Damien sat in his glass-walled office. The skyline stretched behind him like a painting he no longer noticed. He stared at a photo on his desk, a candid shot of Ella at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a youth center she'd funded. Her son, Micah, was standing beside her, clutching a pair of oversized scissors. Damien traced their outlines with a fingertip. He hadn't stopped loving her. Not even for a moment. The day he discovered Nolan's forged DNA test, buried beneath a false name in the archives of a private clinic, was the day his world collapsed again. Walter Hartley had been recovering from a stroke at the time, too weak to fight, too stubborn to admit fault. But Damien had confronted him anyway. "You made me walk away from her," he said through gritted teeth. "From my son." Walter, pale and gaunt in his wheelchair, had whispered, "I was trying to protect you. I didn't trust her." "Well, I did," Damien replied coldly. "And now I'll fix what you destroyed." He ordered his assistant to find her, not just for the company, not out of guilt, but because he'd been carrying 5 years of silence like a stone inside his chest. He couldn't hold it anymore. Ella stood at the top floor of her newly renovated Holloway Builders headquarters, the city stretching beneath her feet. Micah was at daycare, Noah off at college, and for once, the office was still. She clutched the bracelet on her wrist, a simple childhood trinket, all worn thread and colored beads. She never took it off. She didn't know why exactly. Only that it reminded her of something, of someone. The elevator chimed behind her. She turned, and there he was. Damien Hartley stepped into the room, his expression unreadable, eyes locked on hers like he hadn't seen another soul in 5 years. Her throat tightened. Her hands fell from the bracelet. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "I never signed the divorce papers," he said, voice low. "You're still my wife." Tears welled in Ella's eyes before she could stop them. 5 years, Damien. You let me go." He stepped closer and pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This is the real DNA test. Micah is mine. I didn't know until it was too late. And that bracelet," he gestured to her wrist. "I gave that to you when we were kids. Summer camp. You gave me a green one in return. You don't remember?" She gasped. A hazy memory of a shy boy with kind eyes and a broken sandal flickered through her mind. Her lips trembled. "It was you?" He nodded and reached for her. "It's always been you." Ella collapsed into his arms, years of pain and silence dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. Damien held her like he never wanted to let go again, his hand cradling the back of her head, her heartbeat finally syncing with his. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. There was too much to say, and yet, in that stillness, everything had already been said. She had forgiven him, and he had found his way back to her. But peace, in their world, was a fleeting guest. That night, as Ella tucked Micah into bed, she felt something shift in the air. Her son looked up at her with curious eyes. "Mommy, someone called me today. They said they were a friend from school and wanted to hang out after daycare, but it didn't sound like them." Ella's heart seized. "Did you talk to them long?" Micah shrugged. "Not really. Just a minute. They said they'd see me tomorrow." She kissed his forehead and smiled, but dread tightened in her chest like a fist. When she told Damien, he went pale. "We need to be careful," he said, already dialing his assistant. Ryan and Savannah, they've got nothing left to lose. And he was right. In a decaying warehouse on the edge of the city, Ryan Hartley paced the concrete floor, eyes bloodshot with desperation. Savannah leaned against a rusted support beam, sipping wine from a cheap plastic cup like it was fine crystal. Their plan was simple and cruel: lure Micah away. Hold him just long enough to force Damien to transfer control of Hartley Group, or destroy him. "This is our last shot," Ryan muttered, gripping a burner phone. "We take the kid, we name our price, and then we vanish." "You'll get your empire," Savannah sneered, "and I'll finally watch her fall." The next day, Micah never made it home from daycare. Ella's phone rang with a call from an unknown number, but the voice on the other end wasn't a stranger. "Don't call the cops," Ryan warned. "You want to see your son again? Damien knows what to do." Ella dropped the phone, breath caught in her throat. Her knees buckled. But Micah had inherited more than just his father's eyes. He had Damien's mind. Inside the dusty warehouse, the boy sat tied to a chair but kept his cool. When Ryan stepped out to make a call, Micah wriggled his wrist just enough to activate the hidden SOS button on his smartwatch. A soft beep confirmed the signal was sent. Back at the penthouse, Damien's phone buzzed. He opened the alert and froze. "They have him," he whispered, showing Ella the screen. She didn't hesitate. "Let's go." They sped through the city like lightning, the car cutting through traffic as if propelled by sheer fury. Ella clutched Damien's hand, her mind racing with a mother's worst fears. At the warehouse, Ryan's confidence cracked the moment he heard tires screech outside. Damien burst through the door first, his eyes blazing. "Let him go, Ryan." Ryan grabbed a knife from a nearby crate, holding it low. "You always get everything: the name, the power, even the girl." Savannah lunged at Ella with a snarl, but Ella met her head on. The years had hardened her, sharpened her. She blocked the first swing and slammed Savannah against the beam, voice like steel. "You don't touch my son." Damien dodged Ryan's blade and tackled him, both men crashing to the ground. The knife clattered away. Damien pinned him down, fists clenched. "You're done." Outside, sirens wailed. His assistant had alerted the authorities the moment the tracker activated. Ryan thrashed beneath him, but Damien didn't strike. He stood instead, chest heaving. "You don't deserve another word." Police stormed in, guns raised. Officers hauled Ryan away in handcuffs as Savannah was dragged out screaming. Ella cradled Micah in her arms, tears streaking her face. "You're okay, baby. I've got you." Damien wrapped them both in his arms, the storm that had followed them for so long finally breaking. "You're strong, Dad," Micah whispered, smiling up at him. Damien laughed through the tears. "Not as strong as your mom." A week later, the family stood on the porch of their new home by the sea. Walter Hartley, older now and frail, sat in a wheelchair beside them, his eyes soft with regret. He reached out to Micah. "I was wrong," he said, voice raspy. "About you, Ella, about everything." She took his hand, eyes kind. "We forgive you." That evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean, Ella rested her head on Damien's shoulder. Micah sat between them, drawing dragons in the sand with a stick. "This," Damien whispered, "is the best part." Ella nodded, heart full. "The very best." Life lesson from Ella and Damien's story, approx to 300 words. The story of Ella Monroe and Damien Hartley reminds us that true love is not just about passion or wealth, it's about protection, belief, and redemption. Ella endured betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, yet she never stopped fighting for the ones she loved. She could have given up. She could have become bitter. But instead she transformed pain into purpose, proving that strength doesn't come from status, it comes from the heart. Damien, born into power, could have turned a blind eye. But he chose to listen, to see the truth in a woman the world tried to dismiss. He made mistakes, yes, but he owned them. He searched for the truth, and when he found it, he didn't hesitate to fight for the family he almost lost. Their journey teaches us that forgiveness is powerful, that second chances matter, and that sometimes the people we least expect end up being the ones who save us. When everything around you falls apart, your integrity, your ability to do what's right even when it's hard, is what defines you. And family, it's not built on blood alone. It's built on loyalty, sacrifice, and love that never gives up. So if you're standing at a crossroads, wondering whether to keep holding on or to walk away, remember Ella. Remember Damien. The storms may come, but the ones who truly love you will always find their way back. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to know where our listeners are tuning in from. And if you want more powerful love stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Your next favorite story is just one click away.